everyone. Today's podcast episode is from our fourth recording of Renegade Thinkers Live, our live streaming series. The show got a little bit meta as we were talking about virtual events doing a virtual event, but it's full of useful insights for those navigating the virtual event world, which is just about every marketer. CMOs Paige O'Neill of Sitecore, Mandy Dollywall of Dell Boomi, and CEO David Fischette of Go West Creative shared their key learnings from 2020 with use cases, technical challenges, creative opportunities, preparation requirements, and what events will look like in the post-COVID era. Enjoy your workout or pour yourself a drink and tune in to find out and learn from these three insightful leaders. Now, speaking of technical challenges, in this episode, we faced a few audio troubles, so please bear with us for any uncomfortable sounds you may hear. The insights you'll get are worth it. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the fourth episode of Renegade Thinkers Live, a show that promises to be long on marketing insights and short on overhyped buzzwords. We'll be drinking in the latest tactics and the coolest gin. Yep, this may be the only live marketing show also featuring a gin tasting. This show is being live streamed via our friends at Restream, and if you want to drink along at home, today I'm doing a solo tasting of Dorothy Parker Rose Petal Gin because of the snowstorm here in the Northeast. Anyway, I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. And as I like to say on my podcast, hello, Renegade Thinkers. It seems appropriate that in our last show in 2020, we are going to be talking about virtual events. Since this was the year that everything went virtual, from coffee breaks to happy hours, from the NFL draft to the Belgian Music Festival, this was the year which Zoom became an eponym like Google and FedEx, when hashtag WFH, or work from home, went from a frowned upon exception to a potentially permanent reality. And while most of us have adjusted to this new virtual reality, I think it's important to consider how important physical events were to B2B marketers before the pandemic. I'm talking about in-person events, and I just have a few stats to share with you. In 2019, 97% of B2B marketers believed in-person events had a major impact on their business outcome. Those were poof gone as of March. 68% of B2B marketers relied on in-person events for a majority of their leads. Poof, gone. PwC cited trade shows as the second largest source of B2B revenue in the US. That revenue potentially gone, and in-person events counted for 10 to 50% of B2B marketers' budgets. In Renegade's own survey of 133 B2B marketers, right as the pandemic was beginning, having to replace physical events was their biggest challenge, and by far the biggest reason 97% of B2B marketers had to adjust their marketing plans. Some of it, about half of those, had to do it all the way from scratch. And this makes sense when you consider all the roles that these in-person events played in the marketing mix, from lead generation to deal acceleration, customer training, recognition, and upselling. And this doesn't even count the revenue many marketers generated from their events. Just consider Dreamforce for a second. That was $13 billion in revenue for Salesforce in 2019. That's $13.28 billion to be exact. So in mid-March, just about every B2B CMO was staring at a huge hole in their marketing mix and wondered, what the heck am I going to do? Now, one of those marketers was Paige O'Neill, the CMO of Sitecore, a company that not only hosts its own massive customer event, but also exhibited at others. Longtime listeners to Renegade Thinkers Unite will remember Paige from episode 94 back in 2008 when she was relatively new on the job, and we talked about the first 3 months. Well, she's a veteran now. Hey, Paige, come join us.
Hey, Drew. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you? You're missing all the wonderful snow we had here in New York. You're out in California, right?
I wouldn't say I'm missing the snow.
Okay, fine. Be that way. You know, when you don't have to commute, the snow is a beautiful thing.
Well, that's true. That's true. I lived in New York for a couple of years, and I one year saw someone cross country skiing down 23rd Street and thought, all right, I'm out of here.
It's kind of, well, see, you know, I think it's kind of cool. Anyway, so can you remember back to March and April when it sunk in that in-person events were going to be off the table?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like one of those time periods that I think is etched in most marketers' memories. I mean, you know, we at Sitecore, we had to cancel 50 or 60 in-person events, I think just in a single, like 1 or 2 quarter period. So yeah, it was a wake-up call. It was kind of a scary time, but you know, it was also a time when I think a lot of marketing teams, mine certainly, came together to figure out, what do we do now?
Well, 50 to 60 in a 2-quarter period. So I'm thinking maybe you might have had 100 or more even over the course of a year.
Yeah, so, and a lot of those are really small, but yeah, it's, you know, we had obviously our very large customer event. We had probably 5 or 6 larger, maybe 800 to 1,000 people events, and many events that were much smaller, anywhere from 20 to 100.
So when we're talking about these events, other than your customer event, all these other ones were there to drive leads or to help accelerate sales, right? So, yikes.
Yikes. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, you know, in the US, we were much more digital than we were in other geos. You know, we've got offices all over the world and field marketers all over the world who are generating that pipeline. And in the US, we were already probably running somewhere around 60 or 70% digital, give or take. But in those other regions, it wasn't even close to that mix. So we had to, just like every other marketing team on the planet, we had to very quickly embrace digital, figure out how we were going to do that, figure out how we were going to differentiate ourselves, and try to build that pipeline back up and try to get anywhere close to what we would get with the physical events, which were probably comprising, I would say, 40 or maybe even more, 40+% of our marketing source revenue. So
in April, I saw a bunch of events in March and April, the folks that rushed out, and not to name names, IBM and Adobe, but they rushed shows out the door to sort of have a first mover advantage. But many of us who looked at those virtual events were not impressed. And you know, I don't know about you. Did you go to any of those, or did you see what some of those big brands were doing? And what did you learn from those early efforts?
Of course, yeah. I mean, my team was immersed in, I think Adobe was first out of the gate, and you know, they had an event planned, and I think that, you know, they were able to carry on with it. Their very large customer event just happened to take place, I think, a couple of weeks after we went into shutdown. And so I think what we learned from, you know, vendors like, you know, the Adobes and the IBMs who had to go so quickly was, first of all, they were very brave. I can't even imagine. We were very fortunate to have, I think, about 7 months between when we went into shutdown and had to start having digital events and when we had our large customer event, which just happened a couple of weeks ago at the end of October. And so we had plenty of time to prepare. They had literally weeks, and you know, kudos to them for going out and kind of setting the model. And I think they had some successes, and they had some things that, you know, probably didn't go so well because of the planning time they had. But I think one big thing that we learned was it was going to be okay to be more informal in this Zoom world that we all found ourselves in. I mean, you know, Shantanu, for example, I think looked like he was in his home, in his office, and he was just, you know, very informally standing, delivering a major keynote in his office. And that was, you know, one of the first times I think that had probably happened, because I think on the marketing side, we want to be so slick and so produced. And we learned pretty quickly that it just wasn't going to happen, and that was okay. And so I think that was a big learning.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the authenticity of that, I have to say that there were so many sort of pre-programmed, pre-recorded, boring presentations in a couple of them that I just went, how is this ever going to work? Yeah. I give them a lot of points for bravery, but I think we all got to go to school on them, on their, you know, they did not have first mover advantage, in my opinion. In this case, they were they were brave. And okay, well, let's bring on Mandy Dollywall, who's the CMO of Dell Boomi and the star of Renegade Thinkers Unite, episode 178. Mandy, now I'm sorry you're not going to get to do the gin tasting with us, by the way, for folks listening, that her gin is in New York at an airport stuck. So don't worry about that, but you'll get a taste and you'll have to share your notes on it later. But so first of all, how are you?
I'm doing great. We're winding down the year, Drew, and what a year it's been. Can't say that I'm disappointed that it's almost shutdown time for us at our company. So, feeling grateful for all the learnings this year and hopeful.
Now, you're in the Bay Area, right?
I am.
All right. And so let's go back to March and April for you. How big a gap did canceling all those in-person events leave in your 2020 plan?
It was massive. It was, just from a reach to market, right? We're scaling a business here. So for us to meet our customers and prospects in the market was really core to our strategy and also a big chunk of our budget. 30 to 40% of our marketing mix relies on the event strategy, as well as kind of the analyst relations in those conferences. So, we kind of were deer in the headlights for the first couple of weeks. But we didn't sit still for very long. We recognized very quickly that, our homepage and our website is our digital storefront. So how do we continually drive a really great messaging to ensure that people understand that our technology can help them transition during this time of tremendous uncertainty? And then also started to look at how do we start to fill the gap with the event strategy? So there was a lot of conversation, daily stand-ups, all sorts of things, in addition to handling our own teams as they all pivoted to work from home, which frankly for us was just a flip of the switch. We're fortunate that we were able to, use the backbone of our technology to transition pretty seamlessly. But I do not want to relive March and April ever again.
Yeah, well, hopefully we won't have to do that. I'm curious, when you were, so this hole in your budget, and obviously you had a team that went with it, did you attend any of those early events? And was there a virtual event that you went to in that second quarter where you went, oh, there's hope here?
I went to a couple of, not going to name names, and no, I just kind of went, OMG, what are we going to do?
Yeah, right. I mean, there was a period there where they just kept coming out and, I'm not going to, and they were all day and they were just relentless in it. And I thought, who's going to go to this and where are they going to get it and how is it going to work? But eventually you executed a big event, right?
We did. And, kind of the learnings of the early kind of renegades, if you will, on that front, a couple of things became really clear to us, right? Live kind of lift and shift from the old model to the new model, not going to work. And those of us that have been living the cloud transition have, kind of realized that ubiquitously. So for us, it was really important to kind of learn from others and also really start to talk to our peers, obviously within Dell Technologies as well, and really understand kind of what the gating factors were, and a couple of things emerged as far as takeaways. Record what you can, make the content more snackable, if you will, no more day-long meetings, 20, 30-minute keynotes max, and really start to drive that engagement with the audience and really understand, kind of put yourself in their shoes and understand what they're needing from us and deliver to that. So kind of taking the core tenets of marketing that we all know as our North Stars, but really adapting to the times. Those were some of our guiding principles. And, just candidly, we bumped our way through the dark, right? We didn't have this all figured out.
Right.
The marketing team spent a lot of time kind of understanding platforms that we need, geographies that we need to cover, kind of that coverage. There were so many things, the tactics and all the details. We were masterful at launching and planning our user event. We've gotten really good at that over the years. So we thought this year, that would not be an issue. We had it in the bag. And, our sales kickoff, our My Tech keynote was all about pushing us to the next level, and no idea what next level really meant back in February.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's bring Paige back. And while we're doing that, we're going to also Hey Google, what's a virtual event?
According to Wikipedia, a virtual event is an online event that involves people interacting in a virtual environment on the web, rather than meeting in a physical location. Virtual events are typically multi-session online events that often feature webinars and webcasts.
All right, there you have it. That's what Google says. At some point soon, David Fischette will come on and educate us to the contrary. But let's talk about you, Paige. I know you had Sitecore Symposium, an event that I got to speak at in 2018. I was there. I saw the energy and so forth. When you approached it, what did you see as your biggest challenge for this time?
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly that, the word you just mentioned, Drew, is the so many great things about our annual customer Sitecore Symposium event, but that energy and that community and just the spirit that pervades the entire few days that we're there, we thought, how can we possibly capture that in a virtual format? And I think that it certainly wasn't the same as getting together in person, but I think we pulled off a very engaging event that our community was really excited about. And we had that interactive component. And, I think we did it by, leveraging some of the components that you guys were just talking about in terms of, we knew we had to keep the content moving very quickly. We had to keep the sessions very short. We made sure to build in that interactive component. I think we did a lot of things to build in fun and engage the community. And we did take some things that we could, but we had a fair amount of live components as well. And so that was interesting. I feel like I got a whole different, learned a whole different way of keynoting between stage versus it was more like television, which was, I think, for all the speakers, very interesting. But the community was very engaged and was extremely pleased after the event. And we more than doubled the size of the event. So that's a silver lining, right? Is we got so many more people engaged around the world that couldn't necessarily make the trip to the US.
Right. Interesting. It's funny. I watched your portion of it and it was live. And I thought, the biggest challenge as a presenter is there's nobody there. Even in this show, I get to see the two of you and we can have a conversation and you're smiling, you're reacting. But the notion that you're just presenting to nothing.
Yeah.
That must have been a weird thing.
Yeah, it's very different. And, I love to feed off the energy of a large crowd at these events. And, literally, if you could have seen, kind of what was in front of me as I was presenting, it looked like a television studio. And, there were some production people there and a couple of my team members came to kind of try to amp it up and cheer me on. But, we couldn't really be together. They're all wearing masks and all socially distant. And it wasn't the same at all. But again, I kind of looked at it as, all right, well, I'm learning how to present more as a TV presenter versus as a stage presenter. So I looked at it as an opportunity to, kind of expand my skill set and had fun with it.
So Mandy, come back and let's talk about surprises as you produce these things. And I mean, we've talked about the fact that you had larger attendance, which is great, and you can draw from a larger audience. But what were surprises? They don't all have to be good. I mean, these are, this is a learning opportunity. This is a show helping other CMOs sort of get through this. What didn't work in these things?
So we tried to mitigate the surprises from a technology standpoint because that was front and center, right? We used some technology on the back end as far as load and performance testing. We were working with our partners to ensure that those weren't the surprises that were negative. I think the learning was for us as a leadership team as we did the retro on the event, on the positive side, double the attendance, exactly what Paige said. We did it in a quarter of the cost. Tremendous lift for the entire marketing organization. We burnt out some people, right? Particularly around video production, right? So those were some of the big aha moments. We threw a lot of arms and legs at it, but in hindsight, we should have kept the scope much more limited than what we did. So that's been a definite learning for us. We did have celebrities that we were bringing on to be a part of each episode. We did a 3-week Netflix-like series. Working with them there's a lot of detail behind the scenes in terms of promotion on media, getting them to tweet something out, and kind of all the hand-holding that had to happen there is not as seamless as a B2B marketing team, with us. We just go onto our platforms and schedule tweets. So just a lot of that manual labor that was required to make it go off seamlessly. Behind the scenes, there was some moments of deep trepidation to kind of characterize it.
Well, as we bring up deep trepidation, I think it's a perfect time to bring on David Fischette. David is the CEO and Chief Creative Director of Go West, and he joins us from Music City, Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, David, how are you?
Hey, Drew. Thanks for having me out.
Hello. And it's funny, you and I were talking a few months ago, and March and April. So David, Mandy, and Paige, David runs a really creative company that produces physical events. So now it's March and April, and it had been pretty brutal.
It was pretty brutal, yeah. We saw, it was just millions and millions of dollars worth of projects for the year just cancel in a moment. It was pretty stunning, staggering. But the beauty is, my company, we just turned 36 years old a couple of weeks ago. So we've been around for a long time, and we've actually been doing corporate broadcasting since 1999. So we've 21 years we've been in the corporate broadcasting side of things, but it's always been just a small piece of what we do. It has never been like the front and center thing. It's a very small piece. And we've also done some television production, some film production. So we are able to immediately pivot to all things virtual. That was everything that we did, and it was very, very successful. It was funny, Drew, last night I just produced a massive benefit concert with Blake Shelton and Jason Mraz and Dave Matthews,
I didn't know any of those people.
all supporting and fundraising for the people in the live event industry that have, the 12 million people have lost, so much of their work since March. But we have been some sort of, thank God, some sort of an exception to that rule. We've actually had a very stellar year with the corporate broadcasting and pivoting so quickly. And we've been very, very fortunate to do lots of these broadcasts around the country. And so I'm just really loving what Mandy and Paige have been saying, because we're so very, 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 very in sync. The line that you said about lift and shift and that not working, that's 100% what we came out of the gate trying to tell people is you can't just take what you would have done in the ballroom or a conference center, put it out on the web and think that's going to be a successful virtual broadcast.
And one of the things that, so look, this is where being a savvy entrepreneur, you've been through many downturns before, you knew you had to pivot somehow. And where do you think, so one of the things that you had mentioned to me was that your customers came to you because they wanted a throat to choke if something went wrong. And you talked a lot about fail-safe things, and I would sort of talk a little bit about just the technical background and some of the things that you guys did to make sure that your event stayed live.
Sure. Yeah. So, I'm my greatest gift, and the thing that scares my staff is I'm always thinking, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? How do we mitigate what could go wrong? Right. So I'm thinking, all right, so when we do live events for people and we're in a hotel ballroom or a conference center, if the internet goes down, the client's not coming to us, right? They may say, hey, can you help us? If the power goes down, the client's not coming to us. They're going to say, maybe, can you help us? But they're looking at the venue facility. Now, if we're going to start hosting these virtual broadcasts, either in our studio or elsewhere, if the internet goes down, they're looking at us. If the power goes down, they're looking at us. So we're all about how do we mitigate. So we have a term I like to say, we have to have backups on our backups, right? So every piece of hardware is backed up. All of the internet lines, if we're broadcasting over internet, there's at least 2, usually 3 different sources of internet that are all going into one box that is bonding them all together. So if one thing fails, it just switches over to the other. And you have to have 2 of those boxes because what the hardware goes down, right? So figuring those type of things out. And then we even on certain broadcasts, we'll bring in satellite truck as additional redundancy. And then what about power? Do you need to bring in generator? At our studio, we have an online backup generator. So if power goes down within 12 seconds, it kicks on automatically. And, all the equipment is backed up by batteries. So it'll keep running during the switchover. So it's just, what are all those things that could go wrong and how to mitigate that? Because there's a lot of things that we're, I forgot the term you used there, but it's kind of like, flying the airplane and building it at the same time. Well, a lot of people have been kind of stumbling through this year, trying to figure out what this looks like.
And, I think why don't we bring Paige and Mandy back? Great. I love a little foursquare here. That there are a lot of things that can go wrong. I mean, we've been doing, this is the 4th episode of live streaming, just this show. And we've already experienced, I'm going to say 7 different technical nuances that we didn't anticipate. And live stream, by the way, I mean, these folks have been helping us. I mean, Restream have been behind the scenes helping us, and we're still finding things that are going wrong. I'm wondering what can you share anything that's sort of behind the scenes that almost went wrong, or that you really went, we're not going to do that next time?
For us, it's just trying to have those redundancies. So even the master switch. So on our biggest programs, we try to have somebody in a different city that is also has their hands on the wheel. So if anything should go down locally, we can automatically switch over in a different city and keep going. I think for me, the thing that typically I've seen go wrong the most is we have this new world of executives that or speakers that are used to walking into a hotel ballroom or an event space and having a stage manager grab them and an audio guy put a mic on them, and somebody walks them to a mark on the stage and say, stand here, and the lights come on, and they go, and all they have to really worry about is my deck right, and do I have my speech, and can I speak to it? Now we're asking those same presenters in the home, when we're doing remotes in, to also be their own tech person. Mm-hmm. And so we'll always do tech checks, several days beforehand to make sure everything's good. But what happens, we've seen a lot, is in the moment they forget that we're supposed to hit this button, or my mic wasn't working, or I can't get in, or what was I supposed to do? Because now they're their own tech people as well as being a presenter. So that's the one that you're really trying to, I say pay the learning tax on that one for everybody. It's a brand new skill set we're asking presenters and executives to take on.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. There are a couple of, first of all, I'm the IT department for our house, and my wife has been saying that the IT department needs an IT department. That's been one. But I mean, there are all sorts of things that you can't necessarily anticipate. For example, if on this program, if you leave your email on, that could slow down the feed.
Yeah.
Because you suddenly get 10 emails in, and next thing you know, you're fuzzy and you're chopping. And so there's all sorts of things you can't anticipate.
So that same point, Drew, if you have kids that are home learning, right, and you're doing a broadcast, but your kids are in the other room and they're Zooming, or somebody's on Netflix, right, and it's pulling down your bandwidth in your house, that's another one of the best practices.
Well, and I'll share something that went wrong a little bit as we were executing our event that, it's just something you never would have anticipated. And that's that, within our marketing automation system, we've got safeties in place, obviously, as everyone on the planet does, to make sure that we're not oversending to our database. And so as we were executing the virtual event and we were sending the registered users the login information to get into the event, we had a glitch, which luckily we were able to solve very quickly, where some of them weren't getting the email because they were over the email capacity. And it's just something that we didn't anticipate, right? Because we're not usually sending out emails like this through that kind of a platform to log on to an event. It's such a large volume. It was, 6,000-7,000 emails. And so that was something that we just never could have anticipated, because we were in a whole new world that luckily we were able to triage and solve. But it was a little bit of a panic.
Right, because you got throttled on your email, right? Yeah. Essentially,
exactly.
Because otherwise you would have been spamming them. Right. Oh my God. Yeah, that would make sense.
Whoops.
The ideal thing is in that circumstance is to put the information out there earlier.
Yep.
But that, I guess, would create security risks or sharing risks or other things like that. All right, let's get into David. You've got a couple CMOs here. And you are very familiar with the CMO audience, having spent years producing the event for the CMO Club. What are CMOs, do you think, missing when they're thinking about virtual events? And they're going to just look at Paige and say, what are they missing?
Well, I'm so pleasantly surprised that we have a couple of CMOs that don't feel like they are missing it, because I think that the thing that I am seeing that so many people are missing. And of course, not these ladies here, but
you diplomat, you.
We're talking about audience engagement. How do we truly engage people, right? And we terms like Zoom burnout and WebEx burnout, we get all that. We've all learned how to engage with a screen. We know how to be entertained by a screen. We know what to do with that. We've all been taught how to do that since we were little kids, and that's a television, right? We know what to do with Ellen and Jimmy Fallon and CNN, Saturday Night Live, Sports Center. We get how to do that. So what I've been trying to shepherd people into is how do you create and take some of those learnings from broadcast television and create something that feels authentically true to who you are as a brand, right? You don't want to be over the top cheesy. You don't want to feel disingenuous, but how do you make something, how do you make take those learnings from television and bring it in and like those bite-sized bits, like we were talking about, when you said 20-minute keynotes, it's just made my heart so happy to hear that, because if people are still thinking, okay, so the president's going to speak for an hour, no, and if the president does need to speak for a longer session, we did one with one of our clients a few weeks ago. It's like, all right, we're going to break that up. We're going to do television commercials. Those commercials inside of your presentation will also support some of your content that you're trying to deliver, right? So again, using that television format, because it is a new world, and just taking what we would do on a stage and just because it's the way we've always done it just doesn't work anymore.
Interesting. So Paige and Mandy, when you're looking at events, in the old way, this was a lead machine, right? You get the people in there, and the sales guys would be waiting for someone to show like they were some buyer signal, and then whoosh, and or you would grab the lead and farm it later. As you're thinking about that and that mentality, how am I going to get leads out of this? How did that impact the experience that you created? And I realize that those are completely different things. Because one is you can get the lead just by having them register, right? Yeah. So how do you get from they've registered to the event to they've had an experience that will then inform their choice as choosing your brand versus another?
So I'll start. I think for us, the big learning was the live events, as I stated earlier, were just the in-person physical events, I should say, were our highest converting source, right? So we had a massive vacuum there. And so what we did was, all right, we're getting the names, but how do we nurture them in order to get them to move in a direction that we need them to? And also kind of the landscape behind all of this is in this COVID era, net new customers are harder to come by. They're harder to come by in this commercial segment as well, right? So we're going after enterprise customers that we may have an existing relationship with. Sales cycles are longer. So how do you go relationship build once you've got them in the door, right? With our big user conference, Out of This World is what we called it, instead of Boomi World, because we couldn't replicate the Boomi World, the physical. So once these people came in, we started to group them by company and understand which companies were coming in droves to, really learn more about our content. And then we started to accelerate the field machine, the field marketing engine, to bring them through the funnel in a way, once they've engaged with sales, start to do more of that motion in terms of the education, whether it's hands-on tech workshops for their tech people, CIO roundtables with the more senior folks, and just really start to do a bespoke marketing plan, if you will, that push them deeper through the funnel. We're still at that, obviously, because we just ran our event in October, but that's how we're approaching it, just to give you a frame.
Interesting. Okay, so the big event is really, in a way, is just the start of this conversation. And so how far do you need to take them in this experience to get them so that you can have the next one? In other words, couldn't I do that in half an hour?
They're all snowflakes. There's no hard and fast rule, right? That's something that we've learned. And also, we're entertaining people and their families. I was on with my field marketing team in North America earlier today. We've been doing cocktail mixing. We've been doing cooking lessons. I personally was hosting wine and cheese pairings with a cross section of customers and prospects to get those kind of emotions around closing events and relationship building and that validation, right? So we are an infotainment organization at the top of the funnel, and then we're an engagement organization as you get through mid to bottom, and then we become BFFs with our customers as we convert them. So that's what this year has done for us.
Interesting. Paige, does that mirror what's been going on with you from a and during and post event experience?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think one of the ways that we tried to combat some of the inevitable digital fatigue that you do see, no matter how great of an event you put on, at a certain point, there does start to be some kind of fatigue with it, is by getting extremely targeted. And so I think one of the things that is similar to what Mandy's saying, but we were, of course, leveraging ABM prior to COVID, but we've accelerated everything that we're doing. And so, coming out of some of these larger events, we find ourselves doing a much more intimate event. We're grouping them by industry, we're grouping them by title, we're grouping them by, C-level, and having much more intimate conversations. And I think we're also spending a lot more time doing some really diligent account planning with the sales team. So I think it's brought us closer together with the sales team. We understand the account strategies a lot better than we did across the board. And we also are finding that it's just given us a much more intimate relationship with that nurture process, because you're up close and personal on the screen versus, I think before, a lot of that played out as the opportunity further through the pipeline. Somebody would come to an event and it would have a massive acceleration impact. But now there are a lot more steps. The sales cycle is a little bit longer, and so you're just much more engaged across the board. And so I think it has been a positive, and I think some of it will linger on when we get out of the COVID world. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, and David, as you're listening to this, it's it's a phenomenon that's come up in our conversations in CMO huddles that to accelerate. So a lot of customer events were about really accelerating pipeline, right? You had prospects and you had customers. The prospects were really close, and they'd meet a customer and they'd talk about it, and the next thing you know, it was an easy sell. Well, that goes away in the world of virtual, except there's this whole phenomenon of these specialized micro events where you have 10 to 15 executives and like Mandy, I think you've spent some time in some of those, and where you have a conversation with these, and there might be a couple of clients, and those clients just happen to mention that they've had a great experience, and that helps these prospects move through to finally close, which is a role that the big events use. But it's fascinating, that wasn't in the playbook a year ago.
Right. Yeah. So as you look at the word, somebody said the word platform before, right? And so the platform is kind of an interesting way to look at that. And so now you have probably 10,000 different virtual platforms that have sprung up this year. It's like everybody's got a platform right now. And so so as we look at every client, every event, it's like, what are those needs, right? And if it's a sales, if somebody we're filling the sales funnel, you're going to want to find a platform that has got those engagement triggers inside of it. So you have a general session area, you've got your breakout session areas, and there's some really great platforms that are out there that give you the ability to go, I know Mandy's going to be at this thing, and I want to have a conversation with her, and I can find Mandy, click on Mandy, and not just have a chat, but I can invite her to do a one-on-one video conference outside. Yes. Right, so we can actually have a personal conversation while we're in a general session or a breakout session. So we can connect that way. So we are, it's not face to face, it's not breaking bread together or having a drink together, but it does give us the ability to talk to the people, connect face to face in this new realm until it comes back, and it's never really going to come back the way it was before. I don't think. I think there's always going to be a piece of this now.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I'm wondering, Paige and Mandy, have you experienced what David's talking about in terms of those sort of breakout one-on-ones?
Yeah, our symposium platform did that. You were able to schedule one-on-ones, and you were also able to schedule group sessions so that you could have networking within community together. And then we've done several events on a bit of a smaller scale where the one-on-ones are a big part of it for the sales team.
And how and Mandy?
I was just going to say exactly the same. We're also building it into our sales kickoff, which is now happening virtually in February. right? So how do you take a global team and put them into some level of team building, right? So that's core to that capability is core to being able to have that experience.
Interesting. So as you're thinking about all of this, were there any things that you went, gee, I wish the technology could have done for you this year?
I've got one.
Go ahead.
I would have loved a teleprompter. I admittedly was taping pages of notes or keywords to the back of my screen. So now I know they're available, but back when we first started, I was kind of like, oh my God, I'm a talking head, even more so.
Oh God, it's so funny that you say that because I've been working on a method. And so like this software that we're using has a little side chat bar. I can't use that because my notes, my teleprompter, if you will, are on the right side of the screen. Yeah. So we all need bigger monitors and room. So yeah, teleprompter. Anything else? David, well, you've been close to this technology. What have you been wishing that this stuff would be able to do and support you?
Well, it's interesting, Drew, because what we're doing is our side of the thing is we produce the content. We produce the show, if you will. We produce what the general session, how things are going to be delivered, and then we can push that product to any of those platforms, right? So, what we're doing is we're sitting with our clients and saying, okay, what is it that's important to you? Is it important that you just have something that's simple to use and navigate? You want something sexy that feels like you're in a virtual world? You want avatars of yourself that you can have conversations with other people? Everything exists out there, and everything's got a different price point to it, and a different level of complexity, and a different ramp up time. So we're trying to just figure all those things out. On the teleprompt thing, for me, I hear you. That eye line for me is everything, right? Because if I'm looking, even right now, if I'm looking at you guys down the bottom of the screen, it doesn't feel like I'm really engaged as if I'm looking at you here. So how do you get your information to be able to talk here so it feels like I'm actually talking to the person on the other side of the screen?
I know I have to forget not to look at the screen. It's just one of those things we're all going to have to learn. I'm wondering, there's certain things that have happened, like a lot of people have talked about authenticity versus slick. Let's just say, and David, I saw some of your productions, and they're really cool. But I would argue they're on the slick side of this spectrum, right? They look so cool. And what Paige cited was the guy who was at his home. What we all remember about the NFL draft was we got to see their houses.
Sure.
Right? So in this world of where are you guys, Mandy and Paige, on this authentic versus sort of professional, extreme being slick?
I'm just going to say that there is an authentically slick or slickly.
And no, I'm making an or statement here, please. What do you got? What do you think?
I think both, right? I mean, I think that what we've learned, and I said this at the top of the hour, is it didn't used to be okay to have the keyed down production. No marketer worth their salt would have ever been broadcasting from their home office or in various places in their house. But now that's okay. For our symposium conference, we did get a studio at a hotel, and we did the keynotes and some of the live segments from there. But we had many other presenters who were presenting from home, and we had community engagement where we had people pop in from their homes. So, I think that both, and I think that what we've learned during the pandemic is it's okay to kind of key it down, and you can still have a quality production. But slick's nice.
Yeah, and it's tricky. And I think some of it depends on brand too, right? And there is that or. So what about live versus pre-recorded?
Yes.
Them both, right? Use them both, because not everything has to be pre-recorded. This conversation is so rich, right? Think about just what we're doing right now. If we would have pre-recorded each of our pieces, it wouldn't have this flow. So we did a bit of that, right? But we canned it all. We did do more of the interaction, but I think absolutely there's room for both. And, I kind of want it all. So I'm always not an or person. I'm an and person.
Fine. We'll give you an and on live versus pre-recorded. My concern with the pre-recorded is that you do it and I can't interact with it. And as a result of it, why did I not just get a link to it later or before? And here's the truth. You won't look at it later or before. But I know it takes a lot of the risk out of it, but it takes all the live out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, and just as a producer, I want to live on the edge a little bit. I mean, it's live TV. I hope it all works, right? So, but I mentioned earlier this broadcast I did last night. So we had I think over 20 different artists perform last night, and I think we had about eight or nine of them that were live at the Ryman Auditorium here, and the others were pre-recorded. But for me producing the show, I wanted it to feel as live as possible. So even some of the pre-recorded people that we did, we faked conversations with them with the live host in the room. So when I recorded them 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I'm saying the host is going to say this, and now you wait, and now you answer, right? And so then yesterday, then we had to practice the timing of the host there, then having a conversation with live. So it just made the broadcast feel like there are more elements that were live than were actually taking place. But the point is, if it's all canned, people get it that it's all canned, and then I think it releases them from feeling like they need to be engaged because that person's not really there, and I'm not really, I can watch this video later.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that live performance of the Rolling Stones where the drummer is like banging his books. They cut to him, and it's like, all right, yeah, we've really reached a very pitiful point in the world of live music. Not my favorite moment. Okay, so we're rounding out this thing. We're looking at 2021 now, and there's a chance there will be physical events in the second half, maybe safely in the fourth quarter, maybe in the third quarter. What are you thinking about in terms of physical versus virtual for your planning for, let's just say, fourth quarter to be safe?
Yeah. I mean, again, both, right? I mean, I think one of the things that we've learned is that adding that digital element to that event was fantastic. And so I think that as soon as we can go back to live events, we absolutely will. They're much better for lead gen and pipeline maturation, but the digital events aren't going anywhere. I can't imagine that we won't have a digital component to our larger events from this point forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think most of the CMOs I've talked to have said, yeah, we're thinking hybrid. And of course, that means more cost, because if you're live streaming everything from the physical event, you just now have really created a production challenge. But I think, and Mandy, the same thing, you'll be thinking that 2021 is all going to be a fourth quarter.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing that we kind of put on the back burner was the sponsorships, right? At our user conference, we typically have an opportunity for our partners, our alliances, to come in and, be a part of the expo and so forth. So we never did that this year. It was just too heavy of a lift, and it felt not right to be charging people for access to our audience and so forth. But I think, that to me is something we've got to crack the nut on, because there are joint solutions that we build with these partners, and, providing our community with access to that and information around that in a way that's scalable. And frankly, that offsets some of my costs on the production side of the live event. So that's a revenue stream that we didn't get this year.
Right. So you're looking forward to getting that back.
Yeah.
So
I just jump in there. I think on the hybrid side, excuse me. What you're going to start looking at is you're going to want to start splitting your production team, right? Because you're going to have people producing for the live audience, and you're going to have people producing for what's going on the broadcast. And I think there's going to be bits and bobs that the people on the broadcast are going to see that the people live don't get, and the people live are going to get the experience of being there live. And right, so there's benefits to both. But the word benefit is key here, because I think even when it's safe to travel again, there's going to be people that are going to be scared to travel, right? And moreover, there's going to be people that realize I didn't necessarily need to travel. I don't have to get on a plane. I don't have to be away from my kids. I don't have to, spend all this money, and I can still engage with it. So, yeah, I think because of those two reasons, hybrid is going to be the way we go forward for the long term, I believe.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and this has come up in huddles a lot, is many folks had to give their physical event budget back they just gave that back in April, right? It was just taken off the table. And then some of that got clawed back for virtual events, but you didn't need as much. I mean, it was 1/5 the cost or 1/4 the cost. The question that I have is, that money's off the table. Is it going to get back into 2021? And if you hit your numbers without it, how are you going to even rationalize to your CEOs that you need the money for physical events?
Yeah, and we did hit our numbers without it. We have increased our numbers without it, but yet I still would argue that the physical events are they're pipeline accelerators and pipeline builders. And so even though we did do it with digital, we had to do a lot more digital, and it was just a whole different kind of a marketing spectrum than it would have been with the physical events. And yeah, we didn't really get the budget taken away. We had a lot of costs sunk into venues, and of course the venues, they didn't want to give that money back. They just wanted to move the contract out. So it wasn't so much that we lost the money; we just deferred it into hopefully the later years when the physical events will come back. But I think that the physical and the face-to-face it's pivotal to accelerating that pipeline.
And I think this is where the multiple benefits of events come into play. We know that it's really good for employees. We know it's really good for training. We know there's all sorts of things that happen as a result of the physical events that you just aren't getting now. And then there's this other aspect that we really haven't talked about, and we're going to run out of time on, which is there is such a thing as event fatigue, physical screen time. I mean, I don't know about you, but I am looking forward to not having conversations on a computer for a good week, if not longer. Yeah. And I think people, I'm hearing a lot about not just Zoom fatigue, but screen fatigue. And so, to rely 100% on virtual events in 2021, unless you have to,
yeah,
is a scary thing. All right. So one thing is we're wrapping up the show. One key insight that you want to share for 2021 planning. All right. How am I going to make sure that my virtual events are kick-ass in 2021? Mandy, you're up first.
Really keep the strategy in mind, right? What are you trying to accomplish? Like, let the tactics come later. We get, somewhat enamored by, I'm just going to do this cool new whiz-bang thing, but really understand the purpose in terms of what you're trying to drive. Is it awareness? Is it funnel acceleration? It all leads to revenue, but really understand that upfront.
Right. Okay, Paige, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, just continuing on the path that we've gone down in terms of being hyper-targeted, I think that this has really caused us to hone in on who are we targeting, why are we targeting them, making sure that we're, again, I said this earlier, hand in hand with the sales team. It's strengthen those relationships. And I think that leads to just a better rationale about why we're doing what we're doing, just making sure that we're not, I think that demand gen is going through a revolution overall right now in terms of moving away from kind of the traditional marketing funnel and the spray and pray approach top of funnel. And I think that COVID has accelerated that. And so I think it's just going to be a continuing evolution for the marketing function.
Okay. All right, David, take us home. One key thing to do in 2021, baby.
Yeah, I said it before. So it's writing your program, producing your program in a way that people will engage with it, right? How you get put yourself in the seat of the person that's sitting on the couch, right? What's going to make them want to stay engaged with you? Think about that first and foremost, and then figure out how your content and everything you need to communicate fits inside of that infrastructure.
I love it. And that's a great place for us to wrap up. Thank you, Paige, Mandy, David. You're all really good sports in this live challenge, this challenging live streaming thing. Thank you, New York Distillery, for my bottle of Dorothy Parker. And thank you for the audience for joining us.
Thank you.
Renegade Thinkers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey and Maya Todd. For show notes and past episodes, please visit renegade.com, home of quite possibly the savviest B2B marketing agency in New York City. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.